Hello everybody and welcome back to Make Your Good Business Great. Today I have Ingrid Thompson from Healthy Numbers with us, and she is an absolute gun when it comes to starting up your business. She knows everything and I can't wait to hear everything she's going to talk about. So welcome, Ingrid.
Thanks so much, Kim, and hello everybody.
Thanks for being here. So first of all, tell us, a little bit about your clients that you serve and, some of the general challenges that come up for them.
Okay, so I'm, as you said, thank you, a business coach and a trainer, and I specialise in working with people who are thinking about starting a business or in those very early stages of starting their business. And I particularly am interested in people who are in health professions, Pilates, yoga, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, that sort of field, and they want to take their skills and create a business for themselves. So they want to have their own studio or have their own clinic. And so they might have a lot of knowledge about their field, but they don't know a lot about starting up a business. Mm-hmm. And I have another group of people that I work with is dentists, and I work with dentists and their teams. And these are already established businesses because I've been working with businesses for a number of years. But you would think, gosh, is there any similarity between Pilates and dentists? But the reality is that they're using their specialised health knowledge to help people, their patients, their clients, to live better lives. So oral hygiene leads to overall well-being. Good structure in Pilates, in yoga, acupuncture leads to overall well-being. So for me, the outcome for the patient and the client is this sense of having a better life. And if I can help these practitioners to run their businesses better, then they can help their clients to have a better life.
Maybe the only difference between dentists and, yoga and Pilates is that we just groan when we go to the dentist, but it's still absolutely essential for our health.
It is. And the systemic links and that sort of thing, we know. We know that those are the things. So I think you were asking me about the problems.
Yeah,
or the
what sort of challenges come up for your clients?
Well, I think there's this sense of not knowing what they don't know. So if I really think about the startups, and the same for dentists, dentists go for 7 years to learn how to be a dentist, and there's no actual transition the way there is for a doctor to actually go out and, they don't have a intern year. They just go out and they start treating patients. The same for people who are Pilates, yoga. So the biggest challenge, I think, is that they don't actually understand what being in a business is. Mm. And so will they have enough clients to make their business viable? Will they be able to see enough people? If they sign up for a 5-year lease somewhere to run their classes and to run their sessions and they buy the equipment, are they how many people do they need? Do they have a full understanding of what costs are involved? Mm-hmm. Do they have a full understanding of how to get those costs back? And then how do they pay themselves? Because, if they're resigning from a job that maybe, or they're leaving a workforce where they've earned $75,000, $100,000, maybe more in salary, then, what is it they're going to be able to make as a Pilates instructor in their own studio once they've paid their costs? Mm. So it's, I think for people starting a business, and we get told, Malcolm Turnbull and our Prime Minister and our politicians are telling us, that innovation, and we see the startups selling their businesses for millions of dollars to Google and to Yahoo. Yeah. But, the people that I'm working with are really, the people who want to start a flower shop, or they, and I have worked with people who've started lots of different types of business. I have a client who makes tea, the most beautiful chai tea. And I do work across other businesses, but I am particularly interested in the Pilates, the yoga, because of the outcome it has for their clients.
It's terrific. And like we all should be thinking of anyway, business is about niching, and so that's your niche.
It is my niche. Yeah. It doesn't mean that I can't work with other people, but this
exactly.
is the people that I really want to work with.
Yeah.
And I think the other challenge that I see people coming into business is they don't really understand what it is they're selling. So when someone comes to a Pilates session, they're not coming to a Pilates session. They're coming to make themselves feel better. They're coming because it will help them sleep better. They're coming because it means they've got better movement at the weekends when they're canoeing, when they're cycling, when they're with their kids. You know, what is real problem that's being solved, or what is the real outcome that someone comes to Pilates for? And, you know, it could be for a sense of community, you know. So really helping people when they start their business, understanding what they're really selling. And often it's not just Pilates sessions. It's not just a crown or a filling for a dentist. You know, it's more than that. They're not just acupuncture. They're not just selling, you know, poking needles into someone. They're selling the relief of whatever it is that they're solving for their patients.
That's terrific. And when business owners are looking at that, when they're planning and even interacting with each of their clients, when they have that in the back of their mind, because of the work that they've done with you, the service is just going to be so much better.
Yeah, and I think they don't think so much about that at the beginning, you know, because they want to make the studio look good and what colour will we paint it. And, you know, honestly, sometimes your clients could care less about those things. If you can actually help them sleep better at night, you know, they'll come and see you in a garage. You know, it doesn't have to be a fancy pants studio. So really, the better you are at what you do, people will just come to you anywhere.
Yeah, that's terrific. And so when you start with a new client and they come to you with an idea, what are the things that you take them through so that they should be, you know, have a really good understanding of? And I know we only have a few minutes here on the interview, but, you know, can you talk us through that?
So I have 6 key areas that we look at. So the first one is the ideal patient or the ideal client. So who is the ideal client for your particular business? And so having a real understanding of that, because the clearer we are about who our ideal client is, then the more able we are to talk to them. So when we have a website, the website speaks to them. When we do promotions, when we do flyers, when we put any kind of signage out, then that understanding who our ideal client is. And so often when people come to me, they say, well, I want everybody. And the reality is you don't want everybody. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that idea of what are you really selling? So, you know, being really clear about who is this ideal person, and then what is it that you're actually giving them when they give you the money. So what is that? Then there's the whole compliance. So I spend a whole, you know, we spend a couple of sessions. I have an online program, and there's sessions around, you know, what is the compliance, what sort of a structure are you going to have, about ABNs, which is an Australian business number. Are you going to be sole trader? Are you going to be a company? Do you have GST? How do you keep track of your accounts? So some of that sort of business fundamentals, because often people don't know anything about how to stay on the legal side of everything.
And yet it's so important for people when they're setting up their business to be totally across all of that.
And it's so easy not to know, you know, what sort of insurances do you need? What kind of, you know, what legislation do you need to be bound by? And if you're going to do it in your house, are you allowed to do it? You know, does your local council, you know, and people don't think of those sorts of things. So I have a checklist for all of that. And then about marketing, you know, what is the best way to market? And there's 3 really important things around marketing in terms of, so you have new clients coming. You have the clients that you already have. So how do you attract new clients? How do you take care of the clients you already have? And then what happens to the ones that have kind of slipped away? So how do we reactivate those back into our business? So really a whole segment around, you know, the importance of understanding the 3 different ways of keeping clients coming into your business. And then the last aspect is about them as a person, and just what it takes to be a business person. Because, Kim, as you and I were chatting about before we got started, it's for a long time, isn't it? It's not just something you're going to do for a little while. And maybe for some people it is, you know, but what does it take to be a business person? You know, when you have a job, you can, in many cases, if you really don't want to be there, you can call in and you can stay under the doona all day. And that doesn't work. You have your own business. And, you know, you can take some holidays and you get paid for them. And so just really getting clear about what it takes to actually be in business. And, you know, who are you going to call when you're having a bad day? You know, who is your network? Who are your accountability buddies? Who are your mentors? Who are your coaches? Because it can be very, very lonely. Particularly at the beginning, you know, you're putting on a brave face for your clients, but who hears you? And, you know, often your family has got their own stuff going on. So it's really, who is it for you? So those are the aspects that I take people through. And then to what degree do they need assistance with that? Then we can either go deeper with that, or some people can march off and do it by themselves.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And so they're the 4 fundamentals of business that we should be looking at when we're starting. And you've said it only in a few minutes, except it's so comprehensive and needs such depth of understanding to start up a successful business.
Yeah. And to just be aware of that, I'm in the process of writing a book that covers all of these topics. There's an online program that covers the topics. So, to just spend a few hours and just be aware of what it takes. And then if you really still want to be in your own business, then, how do we start to put that into place so that the business, a business plan, projecting, income and expenses so that you can see in 3 years' time, 5 years' time. And then what do you do with it at that? What's your exit strategy? Is it to sell it to another Pilates person? Yeah. Pilates businesses actually turn over quite a bit because, when people have a baby or, maybe they move, it's a very site specific. So if you're not actually in the same location, it's very difficult to actually run a Pilates studio. It's not something we can do the way you and I are doing this. You and I are in different cities, and yet we're able to do this. There are some Pilates businesses being created online, but there's a lot of people, it is one of those businesses. Acupuncture certainly needs to be done in the person. So, what is the strategy for 5 years, 10 years down the track? Where do you see the business heading, and what do you need to do to put into place for how to do that? So, those are the sorts of things we work through.
So comprehensive. And, I'm just thinking about my own journey, in business that, honestly, I just went for it. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't say anything to it. I just went for it. And if I had have actually got the foundations straight, I'm sure the first 12 months would not have been as up and down and all over the place as what they actually were.
Yeah. And, that's such a good point, Kim, because, a lot of people say, I'm just going to do it, my way, and if I make mistakes, I'll fix it. But you're right. You could be from point A to point B so much quicker. Well, and the other thing is too, it's so much quicker, and you could really, if your aim is to serve patients or serve clients, then you can do that much more effectively if you're not having to scramble around in the background to be running your business. If those things are taken care of, then then the energy you have to give to the clients is so much more solid.
Yes, absolutely. That's a really good point. Because when we, when we are worried, concerned about where it's all happening and then having to work weekends to catch up on things, it's very draining to then be able to give to your clients.
And because people don't necessarily understand GST and don't understand accounts and maybe don't make provisions for tax, having to suddenly pay the tax office or having to suddenly be investigated by the tax office, that's such a distraction. How can you possibly be able to give the sorts of energy, particularly in the health professions that need the hands-on energy, when you're worried about the tax office about to knock on your door because you misunderstood something, or you were doing your own accounts and things aren't the way they should be. I mean, you just say, I'm sorry, and you fess up and you let them have a look and you fix it as quickly as possible. That's what I always say to anybody who's concerned about having made an error, is just say, I'm so sorry, let's get it fixed straight away. I'll get it on the straight and narrow. Nobody's going to jail unless you do something really bad. I mean, and you really can't do anything that bad. But if you get your things set up straight in the first place, then you don't have to worry about those sorts of things.
That's right. And let's face it, running your own business is taxing enough as it is on your health and well-being, and even when you're a health and well-being professional.
Yes. Yeah, because it's a lot of giving and a lot of giving. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And, in relation to, so you've done the startup and then you want to grow your business. Well, even in startup, obviously, you're in that growing phase. What are the top tips that you have for businesses, to get that growth, to get the customers coming in the door?
Well, being really clear about who the ideal patient is or the ideal client is, so getting them coming in the door and knowing where they hang out. so that you can actually advertise. Now, for a Pilates studio, flyers in letterboxes can ultimately be the best way to attract attention. And people go, flyers? What about Facebook, Instagram? Yeah. Yes, well, of course, that's all very exciting. But, you know, if you're looking at having people come into your studio, chances are they're going to live about 2 kilometres from your studio.
Right.
And so walk around and put them in the letterboxes. You know, I mean, people laugh about flyers.
Yeah.
But I think
posters on the walls still work.
Posters on the walls, the library, the community centres, the cafes, having a sign out the front that says Pilates, not moving bodies, because that could be anything, but having, you know, Pilates, because that's, and I say that for every business, is the sign should just say what you are, because that triggers, if somebody's going past and they say Pilates, and then they might Google and look up and say, well, what is Pilates, if they've never heard of it? The other thing, as I was mentioning earlier, is about having to grow your business is to actually be really taking incredibly good care of the people you already have. So if somebody's already come to you, then how can you take enormous care of them? And how do you remind them of the benefits they're having from being in your class or coming to your sessions? And so really helping people see the value that they're receiving because you're doing what they need you to do. And then making sure, and one of the ways you can either have the same people come more often or you can have the same people buy more stuff. So if you've got somebody coming to a mat class, then maybe they come to a private session once a month as well. If you've got somebody coming to a private session once a month, then maybe they come twice a month. And so in your conversation with them, as you know what they're doing and as you know what they need, you start to grow your business that way. And the other thing is the reactivating people who have, for some reason, left. So when somebody doesn't come back, find out. You know, I paid $1,000 a year to go to a gym that was near where I lived. And one year my membership, I always had to renew it myself. And one year I didn't. No one ever called me.
Yeah.
5 years I was at that place. And if all they had to do was call me and say, come pay your membership. You know, we know you've been here for 5 years. No one ever. And a year later, still no one ever came back and said to me, and they had an email address, they had a phone number. I just was gone. And so I think there's a lot of effort and energy goes into bringing people into a business, but I think we're way too willing to just let them drift off. And I say to people, shut the back door.
Yeah.
Close the door and keep the people in.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to die and people are going to move away and, you know, there is going to be natural attrition. But for most businesses, if you want a retention of clients model, and that's what yoga needs to be and Pilates needs to be, is how do you do that? And membership model can be very useful, having a system where people pay you every month because that evens out your cash flow. And all of these businesses lend themselves to finding a way to actually have some kind of membership model. So that's how I work with people to help them grow their businesses.
Yeah, that's fantastic because, you know, as we all know, it takes less money, less energy to keep a client than it does to get a new client.
And also to use the people that you have to ask for referrals. You know, just if somebody loves what you're doing, then, you know, have a nice conversation with them about, you know, do you have any friends or family or anybody else that you know that might be interested in coming along? Yeah,
that's terrific.
It doesn't have to be, you know, grabby and salesy. It can just be genuine. Yeah.
I was going to say, if it's just authentic and it comes in the conversation, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. Authentic, lovely word. Yeah.
And the other thing that you do is your own podcast, and I want to talk a little bit about. So you have a podcast, so you want to start a business, and obviously this is what you do, and this is what you talk about all day long. But, you know, tell us a little bit more about your podcast.
Well, the podcast is called just that, So You Want to Start a Business, and it does interview a wide, broad range of people. So it came about because I've actually been involved with podcasts for a long time. Podcasting's been around for quite a long time, and I was invited some years ago to speak at a conference about how to do podcasting, and I've always sort of helped others. And then I was thinking about my business, and somebody said that, we were talking about lessons learned from people, and in fact it was originally the first Pilates instructor that I worked with, and about the lessons learned from actually starting their own business. And I thought, I wonder if I set up a podcast where I just interview people about their business, and I have a series of questions and I ask them, about lessons learned, and I just have my set of questions. If you listen to the podcast, you'll hear it's the same questions that I ask everybody.
Yep.
And so there are thousands of people who have listened to that, and I don't know who they are. And that's one of the things that I truly love, because it is my gift to people to you don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to. iTunes probably knows who you are, but I don't get anybody's information at all. It is completely free to be able to listen to that, and the information in the podcasts is astounding.
Yeah.
And there's another lovely thing that comes out of the podcast, and that is the actual interviewee themselves have told me how much they have enjoyed being part of the interview, that it's actually a really nice endorsement for them as a business person, because we often don't take the time to go back and do that for ourselves.
No.
Unless you've got a really good coach, or unless you're part of a program. Most people are so busy doing and growing into the future, they don't actually look at how far they've actually come, because some of the people I've interviewed have been in business for more than a couple of years. So they they've go, wow, look at where I have come. And there's one of them who's very successful, and she jokes about being 10 years to be an overnight success, because it can look like she's suddenly very successful, but there's 10 years of really hard work behind that. So
that's right. Yeah, that's
so
right.
I think that's what.
And do you find with the podcast, even though you don't collect details and that sort of thing, has it given you traction for your business?
Well, there's a couple of things it has given. It's given me an authenticity, because I have a podcast show. There are, when you go on, you can't see how many people have listened, but you can read people's comments. So people I don't know have commented, which is a really lovely as a feeling, that when you have started a business and then suddenly you have people that you don't actually know who are endorsing what you're doing. That's we often start our businesses with our friends and families and people that are around us, and then when you start to have people that you don't know at all, or who aren't connected in any way to you, randomly putting a comment. So that's one of the things that certainly has given me a sense of authenticity. And I do get inquiries. I know that there are people on my mail list who, when I send out my welcome email, when they sign up to my mail list, they have said to me that they have come because they listened to the podcast and they're interested in pursuing more. So so it's not really meant to be a sales generation. It really is. It's delightful for me to do. Once I got started with it, I would say if anybody wanted to do podcasts, it's a terrific way to communicate with people. And I know there are a lot of people who make a lot of money in podcasting. If that's part of the business model that you want, you can advertise on it. The more audience you have, you can actually be much more salesy about it. And what I have done is I've taken some of the responses to some of the questions and actually created those into reports, so that we take the same, and that's one of the reasons that I originally asked the same questions, was so that I could say, well, we've asked 50 entrepreneurs this question and here's what they say. And so that can be a very useful, that's a very useful piece of information, which I'm willing to share with other people as well. So it all just becomes part of my collateral.
You could create a book out of that.
I could create a book out of that, So, and maybe, that's a great idea, Kim, actually. I am currently trying to write my So You Want to Start a Business book.
It's your second book.
That's my next book. That's right. And the other thing I would say, if anybody was wanting to do podcasting, because of course the technology has made it much easier now. When I first started getting involved with podcasts, it was much more cumbersome. But now, I am unashamedly a Mac user, and the technology within my Mac and, a small microphone, you can do amazing things. And Skype, and you and I are using Zoom, there's no end. And the other lovely thing about podcasting, and I think this is really lovely because people can see us as we're talking, but podcasting is audio only. And, people can plug it in and they can take their kids to the park and they can be listening. They can take their dog for a walk. So they can be going for a long drive and they can listen to a couple of podcasts while they're driving. So podcasting's become a really great way to communicate.
Yeah,
and if you haven't looked at what's available, it's unbelievable what's available.
Every topic.
The biggest tip I would give you if you're thinking about starting up a podcast is think about how often you actually want to podcast. Because if you say, we're going to have a weekly show is a lot of work. So you could end up spending all your time doing that instead of actually running your business. So if you are going to do a monthly show and then you end up doing an extra one in the middle of the month, that's a bonus. So just thinking about how you want to set that up to start with, and do it about a topic that you love.
Yeah, I think it also goes back to what you said earlier when you established your podcast, what your intention was. Yours wasn't as a sales, creating machine.
No.
So it depends on what your intention is as to how you want to actually create a podcast or not, and whether, what aspect of the business it'll promote. So just finishing up, I know that over the years you have read heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps and listened to heaps and heaps of people. What would be your favourite book that you've read for business?
Kim, that was the most difficult question that you set me up with, and I've pondered that for days.
You can have a couple.
Well, I'd have to say one of the best books, so I'm sort of answering the question from my own point of view, but also from the listener's point of view, is I truly think the E-Myth is one of the best books because it just sets out this wonderful woman who's going to be a baker and she's going to have her own business, and her journey is the journey of every startup. I mean, I couldn't write that book any better. And I think Michael has done a fantastic job. And I think there's specialty ones as well. So you want, like she's got the E-Myth, he's got the E-Myth for different industries. I think the E-Myth is a terrific book. Yeah. I really love, and I go back to it often, is Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Right. I think there's some, that was written more than 100 years ago, and it's all about changed. Yeah, people haven't changed. The technology's changed, and the dress we wear has changed. But that, and I think some of those. So The Richest Man in Babylon. Some of those early books of those sorts of ilk. And to go back to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, I think that again was written 30 or 40 years ago, and the wisdom in that about first things first, begin with your why. Those sorts of things. I mean, I know Simon Sinek has come on and talked about why, but, that's all there in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. So some of those good fundamentals.
Yeah, fundamental classic books. Yeah, absolutely.
Just to remind us who we are and what we're bringing to our people.
Yeah. And who is your guru, Ingrid?
Idols. That was the other really hard question.
You can, again, have more than one.
Well, I have to say I have only just finished reading Elon Musk's book. So he's the guy, Tesla, PayPal, sold it for billions, Tesla, and he's got SpaceX, so he's going to Mars. But he's got such a huge vision. He's really got this big vision for what he's trying to do, and his amount of resilience is really, really terrific. So, I am a bit in awe of him. But I think, my idol is probably not actually a famous person. Years ago, my aunt had a car accident and she's in a wheelchair. And I went to look after her children when they were very little. And, 40 years later, she's still alive and she's still functioning, although from a wheelchair. And there was one morning I was at her house, and I just think her level of resilience to just continue to be cheery. I mean, she is one of my... If I have to pick an idol, I think she's an amazing person. But there was one day that I had to pick the kids up, and we lived in a house that had a gate. So I had to take the car down and open the gate and close the gate and take the car out. And I had done this about 4 or 5 times, and we had dogs and you couldn't leave the gates open. And I remember saying to her, can I just leave the gates open because it's just such a nuisance getting in and out of the car. And she said, Ingrid, I would give anything to be able to get in and out of the car. And I thought, man... Okay, and so that's when I'm feeling miserable about myself, or when I'm feeling like things aren't going the way I want, I just think you are so lucky to even be having this problem. So I think the things that bring me back to reality, that's So yeah, that's my idols. It's those people that bring me back to, man, what are you moaning about? You have so much to be thankful for.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. We often find the greatest courage and mentors and people in our own lives. It's not necessarily all the famous, Tony Robbins, Elon Musks of the world, is it?
Yeah, but they're still inspiring. And I honestly, I think books about biographies are critical to read. Respect. It doesn't have to be business biographies. It can be any biographies, and just that overcoming of challenges. Yeah. That's what helps us all keep going.
That's right. That's right. When we can also, put our own challenges into perspective. Well, Ingrid, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. It's gone so quickly.
Terrific questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us today on Make Your Good Business Great. And I look forward to seeing everybody again tomorrow. Thanks, Ingrid.
Thank you.